knowledge, information, things you know, things you may not know. Learn or don't learn. Up to you on I Don't Know About That with Jim Jefferies. There you go. Hello, welcome to I Don't Know About That with Jim Jefferies. I'm Jim Jefferies. I'm here with Forrest Shaw and Kelly Zabinski.
Yep.
How you doing? We're all wearing our masks and our gloves, social distancing and all that type of stuff. I don't really need it with you, Forrest, because you've been quarantining at my house for some of it. So
yeah,
and all the sex we've had. Yeah. This is all just for show. Well, we're doing so that you don't write in and go, oh, how irresponsible of you for not wearing masks.
We don't kiss though. So
yeah. And I heard that there was a young homosexual man who was quite irresponsible fellow, a friend of a friend, who he's still going out and having sex with everyone because he says that he can't get it because he's on the HIV medicine that they're giving people.
What?
Yeah, so I don't know about that. I don't know.
Episode over.
It's probably how irresponsible you were in the first place that got you into this trouble. Probably you should seek some medical advice.
So we should get HIV. Maybe I'm surprised Trump hasn't said that yet.
Yeah, he reckons the HIV medicine. I know they're giving people HIV medicine, and they're also the malaria medicine at the moment. Our friend Michael Yo had it. He said that he was like a guinea pig. They just kept on feeding him different things.
Yep.
Yeah, his video was heartbreaking.
What I'm enjoying is the bandanas because you get Instacart. Now at my house, I got a little video screen when someone rings the doorbell, and there's nothing better than two blokes in balaclava, like in scarves tied around their mouths, going, "I've got a package for you," and you're like this. You're like, "Oh, thank you so much." I was in the bank the other day. There's people with bandanas, look like, bank robbers.
Yeah.
They come in like this. "I'd like some money, please. There's my card." Yeah. It's just a nice thing that we're doing.
Yeah,
as
I went
society.
to the store yesterday and felt like I should have a gun or something. Like there's something very Wild West about this where I feel like we should rob people.
I think that's coming. If we don't fix it. I think there's a bit of looting coming our way. Not a lot of looting. The human race has impressed me, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
We've done all right. Well done, humans. I thought we'd handle this way worse.
This brings me to the part of the show where we would give out your tour dates. That's funny.
The next conceivable tour that I think I'll definitely be doing is January in Australia. 2021. But there'll probably be gigs before then. I hear that the Midwest is. I hear that Garth Brooks is doing a whole stadium tour in July.
What?
And he's not canceling. Garth Brooks doing it's called Killer Redneck Tour. And
aptly named.
Yeah, and he's and
wait, is it really called Killer Redneck?
No, I made that up. It's not called Killer Redneck. But what happens is Garth Brooks is just saying fuck it and he's going out on tour.
Well, so just keep checking out jimjefferies.com for
and
eventual
you have a special
tour dates
coming out this summer, right?
Yeah, I got a special coming out June or July, I believe. Hold on, I'm trying to drink for a
Also at Jim Jefferies on IG. You can keep up with announcements of the new tour, dates, cancellations. Our podcast Instagram is at IDKAT podcast, which is I Don't Know About That. If you didn't understand what that was, podcast IDKAT podcast on IG. DM us on there with any topic suggestions you have for the show. And real quick, if you want to go over what the show's concept is, Jim, for us.
Well, the concept is this, I used to think I knew a lot about a lot of things, and then the internet was invented. And it turned out I didn't know much about anything. But the podcast, the concept is, that guy in the bar, the Cliff Clavin of this world, that carries on and talks and talks and talks. And before the internet, you used to think they were a genius, and now you just think they're full of shit. So I'm the type of fella that if I'll give any conversation, any topic a go. I'll just give it a go and see if I know anything. And then if you prove me wrong, I'll say, well, I don't know about that. And I'll walk away with my little victory of saying, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. There's no way to prove it.
No prizes involved.
Yeah, no prizes involved. So you'll give me a topic. There'll be an expert on each episode. When the expert comes on, I'll try to guess who that expert is and what they do for a living. Then you will tell me the topic of their expertise. Then I will tell you everything that I know about that topic. And Forrest, do you have a scoring system?
I do. Yeah. So we will individuals will grade. The expert will grade you on a scale of 1 to 10 on accuracy, and then Kelly will grade you on confidence, and I will grade you on believability, 1 through 10, and we add those all up. And if you get anywhere between 26 and 30, you're already an expert on it. So because the maximum could be 30. Between 20 and 25, baby Einstein. 13 through 19, run of the mill. 7 through 12, you're an Instagram model, and 0 through 6, you're a vegetable.
Ah, right.
So,
Well, and also the both of you have the information in front of you. You know about the topic. You've spoken to the person. Ordinarily, we'd have Jack Hackett here as well, but Jack Hackett rang me up a couple of days, coughing and
He's
wheezing,
dead.
hung up the phone, and then I haven't heard from him since.
yeah.
So I'm not
R.I.P.
paying him
Rest in
anymore.
peace, Jack. We'll miss you.
R.I.P. Jack. You need a new assistant. No,
Yeah, we're all having hard times.
all right. So, all right. Let's go to our guest for this week's episode. You can see him on the screen.
Yes.
All right,
Hello,
so-
sir.
Hey, Jim.
All right.
Hi.
So, Johann, I'm not gonna give you his last name just in case, you know. This is what we do, Johann. We call this judging a book by its cover. It's a real quick segment, and Jim likes to play this game in many different facets.
My favorite hobby is judging people.
Yeah,
I love to judge people.
just by the way they look.
Just by the way, look,
Yeah.
me and Forrest sit at the airport. We play a game called "Would You Be Friends with That Person?" Is another one. It's like, would you? Yeah, everyone plays yes or no to fucking people. We play that all day in our head when we're walking along. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, no. Right? But try doing it with, would you be friends with this person? Now I'm looking at Johann. I could be friends with Johann. Yeah, I reckon me and
Yeah.
him could be mates. I don't know if we'd be tight, but you know, he's got books in the background. He's got a haircut that's a solid haircut, not pretentious in any way. He's wearing black. I'm a big fan of wearing black.
All right, so you could be friends with him, but now you're gonna have to guess what he is an expert in, or what we're gonna be talking about today, for instance. So you get to ask him 3 yes or no questions. So you just answer yes or no.
I'm
Johann.
going to use what I can see. He has a book in the background called 1948 or 6 there. There's a book called 1946. That was something that the World War was
Well, you
over.
got to ask him a yes or no question.
Okay,
3 yes,
yes
or no.
or no.
questions.
Are you a scientist?
No.
No, okay. God. Do you work with numbers?
Not really, no.
Not
Occasionally, sort of.
Right. Is your field of expertise in exact art, or is it something that has a lot of probablys and guesswork in it?
The second.
Right. So, okay. So, oh, Christ.
So take your guess,
Um,
and then Johann will reveal
I'm
what he
going to
is.
say that he's an expert in economics.
Wrong. I was gonna say I had wrong ready to go because I just knew you didn't know.
You were really quick on that.
Well, I don't know, maybe, but for specific today, that you might know something about economics, Johann. But please introduce yourself and tell us what you're here to talk about today. So,
I'm very glad that you looked at my face and thought that, because recently my niece, who was 6 years old, was drawing me and my mother, and she looked at me very seriously and she said, you know when children draw adults, they just do a really big circle and a really small face in the middle.
Mhm.
And I said, yeah. And she said, that's not actually a good way to draw adults. I said, adults don't actually look like that. And I thought, oh, that's good. She's learning about like perspective and stuff. That's brilliant. And then she said, but the great thing about you is you actually do look like that. So my picture is really accurate. It's like, fuck you. That's why she's out of my will. Anyway, I'm a writer. Alex, your producer, asked me on because I wrote a book called Chasing the Scream, which is about addiction and the drug war and how we need to understand them both very differently.
That's economics.
economics.
That's economics. The drug war. Without drugs, the economy just falls to bits.
Well, we'll get
My old
into
economics
that.
teacher did not regard me as good at economics and basically said I should stop doing it as a subject. They would be sadly crying at your comment.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, Johann. And he, like I said, he's written on other things and investigated other things, but that's what we're talking about today.
Well, what do you want to know about the drugs?
Well-
Just about drugs?
Well, I'll ask you some questions.
Okay,
so
great.
what we're gonna do now is we're gonna see how much Jim knows about the war on drugs and some addiction questions and things like that. And then, Johann, you can give him a scale from 1 to 10 on how accurate you think he is at the end. And we'll do the other two,
Okay.
confidence, believability. And don't worry about insulting him if you give him a low number. It's not a. It's not an issue.
I'll be fine.
Yeah. So let's just start with that, Jim. Like, what are the origins of the United States war on drugs?
The war on drugs in America, you see, that really kicked off in the 80s with the Just Say No program from your Nancy Reagan. She got right onto that. That's your modern day war on drugs. But if you want to go further back on the war on drugs, you can go right back to Prohibition when they got rid of alcohol because that was a bad thing for the people. And they did that in the 19... Fuck me. That's the 1920s, Al Capone. No, it's later than that. 1940s, Al Capone and all that.
Sure.
Okay. So was that right? Al Capone. Right. So the drugs that you've had a war on, you've had a war on marijuana, cocaine, heroin. You had ecstasy, mushrooms. All the fun ones you've had a war on. You had a war very briefly on the alcohol, but you rescinded that. That was in the Constitution, and then you took it out. Because I always use that as an example of how you can amend an amendment, right? So that was actually taken in and out of the Constitution, or they put an extra amendment in to nullify the other amendment. And that had something to do with the Sixth Amendment.
Okay.
Okay, was that the sixth one?
You're just saying things now. I don't know.
I am saying things, yeah. All right. Now, the
Wait, what's the Sixth Amendment?
It was something to do with, right? It was like you can't have alcohol, and then the Sixth Amendment was like, go
you're already
on,
wrong on that, but that's
go
good.
on.
You guessed Sixth Amendment. But yeah.
Go on, have a bit.
You think it was in the Bill of Rights, Prohibition? That's the first 10.
Prohibition was in the Constitution, and then
is.
it was taken out.
Correct, but it's later on. But it's okay.
Yeah,
You're
the
close.
12th.
Yeah.
The 12th.
Sure, 12th.
The 12th.
Don't say the 13th because that one's slavery, and you don't want to get that one confused. That's
Oh, you wait for the episode where we talk about that. I'm down on all of that. I know when that happened. Anyway,
okay. Keep going. Sorry. Yeah.
So with the drugs, right? A lot of them started off as legal things, right? LSD was a scientific thing in the 70s that they used to give to people who had some mental health issues or whatnot, and they gave it to them to give them more clarity. But then, like all fun things, the government went, people are enjoying it, make it illegal, right? Ecstasy or MDMA, the active chemical in ecstasy, right, was given to married couples so they'd fuck more.
Oh.
Right, that's what I remember. I've heard this. Whilst taking ecstasy, someone has told me this. And so what happened?
That was what they said. That's what they said. They were like, hey, take this so you can
married
fuck more.
couples, we're not getting along. Me and you, we're a married couple. We're not getting along.
Got it.
Here's some ecstasy. You take some ecstasy. And what happened? People started enjoying it on another scale, and the government went, stop having fun. And so they took that away as well. Now, weed has been around since the dawn of time. Jesus probably smoked weed. Marijuana has been around forever. Cocaine was invented. I know that Himmler was on cocaine in World War II. So I'm going to say that cocaine's been around for 200 years.
Okay.
In an active way where people have been snorting cocaine. I'm going to say 200 years of cocaine snorting. And that was the one where Reagan came in with just say no. And what happened with the war on drugs is
it's very well thought out.
They
what you're doing
started.
so far.
I don't know. What they started doing is they would get if you got caught with drugs, you would get life sentences, which now they're trying to revoke because there's people in prison now that have sold a bit of weed, which is legal now here in California, that had 25-year sentences. And that's something that happened in the 80s. Everyone reckons Reagan was great. And it turns out that bigger sentencing and all that type of stuff doesn't do anything on the war of drugs. It doesn't change a single thing. It doesn't stop people from selling drugs or buying drugs or whatever. Because, if you get caught, if you have drugs in your person, I know people who have taken drugs. I've met people who have taken drugs. Myself, never taken drugs.
Yeah. That's what people say about you.
But if you get caught carrying it, you could lose like your green card. And I know people who had green cards. I had one myself, right? And that's a constant pressure over you while you've got the green card. And then, but you still do it anyway. So the war on drugs doesn't work, is my point. It doesn't work.
Okay.
Because people are still going to take drugs because you think you're going to get away with it. And making a sentence, because if you give someone a 5-year sentence for selling cocaine, right? Or you give them a 25-year sentence, people aren't going to go, I was willing to go to prison for 5 years. No one wants to do any of the
right,
The
sentence.
assumption is they'll never get caught.
Well, hold on. This is now you're in the world of opinion. So we just wanted to get the facts that you knew in the war on drugs and stuff.
I think you'll find those are facts.
Okay. Okay. I'm not saying that they aren't.
Right.
But all right, let's take a moment and go over everything you said, and then there's one more question I want to ask you just before we go.
Oh, I just went to drink through me mask.
Tell us everything you know about drug cartels and narco traffickers. Just briefly tell us everything.
All right, so the biggest drug cartel of all time is your Narcos, and that's your Pablo Escobar, and he lived down in Colombia, and he had a village there called Medellin, and he made all the cocaine, and he used to fly it up with in planes in that Tom Cruise movie, where they used to dump him from underneath, from the little hatch down into mostly Florida, places like that where you grew up. Like, they're the drug capitals,
yeah,
right?
Well, Florida definitely.
Yeah, Florida, and all those redneck bits down the bottom, they all dump the drugs, or they try to get them up through Mexico or whatever. But Colombia that's your biggest cartel, and that's they make the cocaine. Your heroin, that comes from your Afghanistan. Afghanistan's main crop is the heroin. They make the poppies that make the heroin. And that's probably has something to do with 9/11 and why we had fights with them.
What about weed? Where does all the weed come from?
The weed comes from here in California. It's grown here.
It's always been grown here.
I think the weed was never brought in. I think we just had it, right?
Yeah,
we just had it.
Yeah.
In Australia, we have a big smack problem. Cocaine is about $350 a gram, where over here it's about $50 a gram. And the reason it's so expensive in Australia because the only cocaine that gets in there is in condoms up people's asses. And that's the only way we do it, because we don't have the plants. But we do have a lot of speed, and we have a lot of meth. Anything that you can make in a lab, Australia goes crazy for, because we're an island.
Let's stop there. You've said a lot of stuff.
A lot of good stuff.
We can say some more stuff later. We can ask you some more questions later, but I think there's a lot of stuff there, and I see Johann is getting uneasy by your answers. So, I don't know. Maybe he's not. Maybe I'm reading into that. But Johann, how did Jim do?
Hey, let's take a break real quick. We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Guys, let's talk about sex. Good sex. Now you can increase your performance and get that extra confidence in bed. Listen up. BlueChew.com. That's blue like the color blue. Forrest, what do you reckon?
I thought it was blue like BLEW, but I guess that's it is BLUE, huh?
Yeah. Blue Chew brings the first chewable pill with the same FDA-approved active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, which can be very costly. You can take them anytime, day or night, even on a full stomach. And since they're chewable, they work twice as fast as a pill, so you can be ready when the opportunity rises.
Wait, you can't take the other ones on a full. I didn't know about the full stomach.
This is a much better system. If you could benefit more with confidence where it counts, Blue Chew is the fast and easy way to enhance your performance. Blue Chew is prescribed online by licensed physicians. So you don't have to go to the doctor's office or wait in line at a pharmacy, and it ships right to your door in a discreet package.
That's good.
That's good, because you don't want people having stiffy pills. The guy looking at you different.
Yeah, like
you like the discretion.
Strobe light on the package. That'd be bad.
They're made in the US, and since Blue Chew, this is good for America. Buy American. And since Blue Chew prepares and ships direct, they are cheaper than a pharmacy, and best of all, no more awkwardness. It can be so awkward. Right now, you've got a special deal for our listeners. Visit BlueChew.com and get your first order free when you use our special promo code JIM. That's the code JIM. JIM. Just pay $5 for shipping. Again, that's BLUEChew.com. Promo code JIM to try for free. Blue Chew is better, cheaper, faster choice, and we thank them for sponsoring our podcast. Thank you, Blue Chew.
Jim. Promo code.
As people adapt to this changing world, we're all going to be buying more stuff online than ever before. If you're an e-commerce seller, then you're e-commerce, seller. Are you ready to meet the demands of your new delivery culture? Be ready with ShipStation. Why ShipStation, you ask? When you're selling online, getting lots of orders out fast, that can be tough. How do you keep track of who gets what? Which shipping carrier should you use? Who's going to get you the best rates? That's why you need ShipStation.com. It's the fastest, easiest, and most affordable way to manage and ship your orders. Just a few clicks and you'll be managing your orders, printing out labels, and getting your products to happy customers.
Boxes.
ShipStations. It makes it too easy. It's too easy. Don't you think, Forrest?
I mean, it's great. I think you're going to ask me about my Etsy shop.
He's not excited enough. I don't think he's getting the gravity. ShipStation helps online sellers of any size get orders out quickly, save money, and save money on shipping costs. Who doesn't like saving money? And you keep the customers happy, no matter what you're selling. Amazon, Etsy, your own website. ShipStation brings all your orders into one simple interface. Forrest, how's the shipping on your new Etsy shop going?
It's going pretty good. You can do it from your cell phone too. That's a pretty cool thing. I've used this. So
Really?
yes, really.
ShipStation works with all major carriers, including UPS, FedEx, UPS. I thought that was UPS.
No, it's
USPS.
USPS is the United States Postal Service.
Never used them. Even Amazon Fulfillment.
Wait, so it's USPS, FedEx, UPS, and then Amazon Fulfillment.
It would be easier to say the companies that they don't use. None. They use them all. They even offer big discounts on shipping costs. Now, any business can access the same postage discounts that are usually reserved for large Fortune 500 companies. You always know they're getting the best deal. They're dodgy, aren't they? But now you can do it along with them. No wonder ShipStation is the #1 choice of online sellers. You'll ship more in less time with the best available rates. And right now, tell them about right now.
Right now, I don't know about that. Listeners can try ShipStation free for 60 days when you use the offer code JIM. That's JIM. Make sure your business is ready to meet the demands of delivery culture. Get started at ShipStation.com today. Click on the microphone at the top of your homepage and type in JIM. That's JIM.
Not GYM.
Yeah, that's
JIM.
That's ShipStation.com. ShipStation.com. Then enter offer code JIM.
JIM.
ShipStation.com.
JIM.
No, ShipStation.com.
Make ship happen.
And we're back. How did Jim do as far on a scale of 1 to 10, do you think, and his answers there? Do you think he was pretty accurate?
I would say Jim impressively got the moral core and the basic arc of all the arguments correct.
Correct.
Got quite a lot of details wrong, but that's okay. So I would give Jim 8.5. I think he did really
Wow.
well.
See,
That's
that's
good.
like how I fundamentally know what sex is.
Yeah.
Right, but I get some of the details wrong
Yeah.
when I'm actually doing it.
Yeah.
Like I get that the clitoris is at the top end of the hole, but I don't know how hard I'm meant to rub it. But I know that some women enjoy it being rubbed. You see what I mean?
Depends what
Right.
position you are in, too, for the top or the bottom. All right. What do you think about confidence, Kelly? We're on a scale of 1 to 10.
I mean, insanely confident,
Thank you.
obviously. I think
Yeah.
he's a 10 on confidence.
I think he's gonna crush confidence.
Yeah.
every day. Yeah.
I think I might be giving 10s this entire show.
It's because I'm on cocaine.
Yeah. Believability. There was so many things you said that I know are wrong.
What do you mean that you know are wrong? What do you know about bloody drug trafficking?
Nah, well, just things like I've never taken drugs,
No.
things like that. I don't believe that. The Sixth Amendment, Jesus smoked weed.
I'm not saying Jesus smoked weed.
We've always had weed here.
I'm saying,
We just had it laying
I'm
around.
saying that at the Last Supper, you're telling me there wasn't a joint. There wasn't a joint. Did they smoke anything back then? Because I know like Native
Yeah.
Americans were smoking shit for like in pipes and all that type of stuff, right?
Yeah, maybe. I'm
So
giving
you're
you
telling me-
a 0.5 on believability.
You're telling me that there wasn't a joint at the Last Supper.
Yes, that's what I'm telling you.
How?
I don't know. This is not the right climate to grow weed, I don't think. But so you have a total score of 19. It's not bad. That means you're
What was there?
Surely there's a half point missing there because I gave him 8.5.
I give him a half point.
Yeah.
On
And I give him a
believability.
10.
Yeah, on believability. So I like that you're keeping up with it, Johann. Though. Thank you. Because it is very important that we get this right. So you're just running the mill right here. But that's pretty good. You're right on the top end. You're almost a baby Einstein. If I would have given
pretty
you
good. That's pretty
yeah,
good.
But I didn't want to give you a baby Einstein because I don't feel like you're baby Einstein. So Johann, can you please just talk to us a little bit about like the origins of the war on drugs?
So just quickly, wasn't baby Einstein like a moron? Wasn't that the whole thing that you have when you've got a stupid kid? You go, oh well, Einstein didn't talk till he was 5.
Yeah, but he'd still be
still
pretty
becomes-
smart.
yeah.
He become teenage Einstein. There's a smart chap.
We're
Baby Einstein's an idiot.
probably gonna change the categories each time, just so you know.
Baby Einstein's just sitting around going, oh, the world.
Can't even
hey."
walk. Fucking idiot.
Yeah, can't walk. It's shit. Baby Einstein's shitting his pants.
Well, you know, but he's doing it.
So, like we said, your baby Einstein.
So Johann, we're gonna let you speak for a little bit here. What if you can please tell us, like, you know, the origins of the United States war on drugs?
I learned a lot about this for kind of a quite personal reason. In that, one of my earliest memories is of trying to wake up one of my relatives and not being able to, and I didn't understand why then. But as I got older, I realized we had addiction in my family, and like a lot of people, I was trying to figure out what I could do. Nothing seemed to be working in that situation. So I ended up, for my book Chasing the Scream, going on this big journey all over the world. Ended up being kind of 3 years and 30,000 miles. I wanted to go to places that had really harsh policies towards people who use drugs. Places that had the most compassionate policies. So I went to Portugal, where they decriminalized all drugs, and Switzerland, where they legalized heroin. And I just met a crazy mixture of people, from a transgender crack dealer in Brooklyn to a hitman for the deadliest Mexican drug cartel. And I learned a huge amount. But I guess the core of what I learned in response to the first thing you asked, which is about the origins of the war on drugs. I mean, I learned so much. Drugs aren't what we think they are. Addiction isn't what we think it is. Legalization isn't what we think it is. But I guess in terms of the origins of the war on drugs, it's kind of surprised me, because I thought, so Jim was a bit off but they was basically right about, if you go right back to prohibition. I thought, without really thinking about it, I thought that drugs would have been banned when they were, mostly in the 1930s, for the reasons that we would give now, right? You don't want kids to use drugs. You don't want people to become addicted. What's fascinating when you go back is that stuff never came up. That's not why drugs were banned, right? And I opened my book with this moment in history that I think tells us a lot. So in 1939, Billie Holiday walked on stage in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, and she sang a song called Strange Fruit, which obviously later became famous. It's a song against lynching. It's an incredibly powerful thing to do. They didn't even let her walk through the front door of that hotel because she was African American. So to stand up in front of a mixed race audience and sing this song was incredibly powerful. And that night, Billie Holiday got a warning from a man named Hari Anslinger, who was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And they said, stop singing this song. And it might seem like a weird place to open the book. You think, well, what's that got to do with the war on drugs? It's got everything to do with why the war on drugs began and why it continues. So Hari Anslinger, and this is where Jim was totally right, Hari Anslinger took over the Department of Alcohol Prohibition just as prohibition was ending. And he wanted to keep his department going. And so he invented the modern war on drugs. He's in fact the first person to ever use the phrase war on drugs. And he built it around two intense hatreds that he had. The first was of African Americans. He was so racist that he was regarded as a crazy racist in the 1920s, right?
Wow.
He used the N-word
really
so often.
You really got to go for it, eh?
Yeah, you have to be so fucking racist.
And the second group he really hated was people with addictions, right? And to him, Billie Holiday was a symbol of everything he hated. She was an African-American woman singing this song. She had a heroin addiction because she'd been horrendously raped as a child for many times, and she was trying to deal with the pain of that. And when Billie Holiday gets this warning from Hari Anslinger, she basically said, fuck you, I'll sing my song. I've got a right to do this. At that point, Hari Anslinger resolved to destroy her. He employed an agent called Jimmy Fletcher to follow her everywhere she went. He hated employing black people, but you couldn't really send a white person to follow Billie Holiday around Harlem. It'd be kind of obvious.
Oh, so he was black? There's a guy that he employed. What was his name again? Sorry?
Jimmy Fletcher.
Flat. Okay, Flat.
He
yeah.
must be very hated in the black community, right? Historically.
That's fascinating. Well, it's fascinating. So Jimmy Fletcher follows her around for 2 years. And Billie Holiday was so amazing that he fell in love with her. And his whole life, he felt really ashamed of what he did next. He arrests her. She's put on trial. The trial was called the United States versus Billie Holiday. She said that's how it fucking felt. She's sent to prison. She doesn't sing a word in prison. But the cruelest thing, this comes back to what Jim was saying, is what happened next. So when she got out, anywhere if you wanted to perform anywhere where alcohol was sold, you had to have a license. It's called a cabaret performer's license. Anslinger's men make sure that she doesn't get it. This is what we do to addicts all over the world today, right? We give them criminal records. We put barriers between them and getting back to a decent life. In that situation, Billie Holiday relapses. A few years later, she collapses. She's taken to hospital. The first hospital won't even take her in because she's got an addiction problem. The second one does. She's diagnosed with quite bad liver cancer. And Anslinger's men come in and they arrest her on her hospital bed. They handcuff her to the hospital bed. She starts to go into heroin withdrawal. So the doctors give her methadone. She starts to recover. 10 days later, they cut off the methadone on Anslinger's insistence, and Billie Holiday died the next day. And to me, this is a story that tells us so much, partly about why the war on drugs began, right? It was always about persecuting people with addiction problems and disproportionately persecuting African Americans and Latinos.
Did she die from the withdrawals or did she die from the cancer? What did she die from?
She was already weak with liver cancer, but heroin withdrawal is like a flu. So giving someone who's weak with cancer a flu, right, it can kill them.
And how long is, because I've been told that heroin withdrawal is worse than any illness you can have. People say it looks like death. You'd rather die.
Plus,
right?
Even if you had...
massively varies. And there's a bit of a mythology about this. So some people do have very bad heroin withdrawals. For most people who withdraw from heroin, it's like the flu.
Right.
And also depends how long you've been using and so on. But just to say one last thing about Billie Holiday, to me, the most important thing I took from this story is, how do I put it? No matter what they did to Billie Holiday, she always found somewhere to go and sing that song. She would go to the worst parts of the Deep South. She would sing Strange Fruit. No matter what they did to her, she didn't let them break her. And to me, it really helped me with the people I love who've got addiction problems to think about, and there were lots of other people I met on this journey for the book that taught me this as well, how unbelievably heroic Billie Holiday was and how many people with addiction problems were. Billie Holiday never stopped being addicted, right? We only tell one heroic story in this culture about addiction, which is that people recover. And that is heroic, and everyone who does that should be proud of themselves. But Billie Holiday never recovered in the way that we think of it. She was still a hero. Every day, all over the world, people listen to Billie Holiday's music and they are made stronger. And every day all over the world, we still follow, with a few honorable exceptions, the drug policies laid out by Hari Anslinger, and it makes people weaker. And this conflict between them really continues.
Now, with Hari, what's he name? Anslinger?
Yeah.
Anslinger, yeah.
Anslinger. With Hari Anslinger, he makes these policies. Now, did these policies, because the policies, Australia was very, growing up in Australia felt very much the same as here in America. If you got caught with drugs, you're in a lot of trouble, and in Britain didn't feel that much different. Was this the first place? Was America the first place to have these draconian measures that then spread across the world, or is the rest of the world already sort of doing this?
It's a really good question. Yes, it was. And Anslinger actually managed to impose this. So the US goes first on most of the bans, and most countries didn't follow because the results in the US were a disaster. After they banned drugs, deaths from drugs went up. The whole trade was transferred to armed criminal gangs, used to be controlled by pharmacists and doctors, and most countries didn't follow. So Anslinger's pressuring from the 1920s for every other country in the world to adopt it, and most didn't. Then you get to after the Second World War, where the world is in ruins, and the US is the sole remaining standing superpower. At that point, the US imposes these rules on other countries. They say, basically, if you don't join the drug war, we'll cut off access to trade, we won't give you aid. When the government of Thailand, opium had been legal in Thailand forever, right? The government of Thailand said, we don't want to do this. This isn't a good idea, hasn't been good for your country, it won't be good for ours. And Anslinger said, these were his exact words, I've made up my mind, don't try to confuse me with the facts. Right. And to me, that could be the motto for the whole drug war the world over, right?
So before the drug war came in, you're saying after the Second World War, when the other countries started taking over things, could you buy cocaine and heroin in shops or anything like that? Or was it just...
Yeah. So the most popular way of consuming these products were bought from pharmacies. So the most popular way of consuming opium was in something called Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, which you would go and buy. There were cocaine-based products. One was called Vin Mariani, which was cocaine-laced wine. It was consumed by Queen Victoria, the Pope. There were some problems related to drugs prior to the prohibition of drugs, but it's worth noting all of the problems got significantly worse after they were banned, right? And we can see this at the other side of the drug war. Once you decriminalize and legalize in the places that I went to, you can see it's not perfect, but these problems radically fall and reduce.
Is that wine on eBay? Has anyone got like
It
a
sounds
bottle? Is there still
delightful.
a bottle of that? Queen Victoria, the Pope used to take. What a confident Pope was. He's like, yeah, no, it's fucking kids. We're all good here. We're all good here. You're good. I'm good. I'm good. Right. So I always know that the whole fable of the original Coca-Cola had a little bit of cocaine in it. Is there any other stories of stuff like that?
Yeah, so it was the same from the coca plant, the same extract. But I also think it helps us to understand.
Hang on. I was arguing with Forrest about this before.
Huh.
Is the flavor cola from a plant? Is Coke? Is there a cola? Is a cola nut? Is it a This is a separate episode, I'm sure.
What do you mean that it was that they
I don't
put
get the
cocaine in
answer.
Coca-Cola?
Not that they put Coca-Cola in it. What is the flavor of cola in a Coke? It comes from the cola bean.
No, I wasn't arguing about this. I think I was arguing about whether there was cocaine in Coca-Cola.
No. There was cocaine in
Yeah.
Coca-Cola, but where does the flavor cola come from?
I don't know.
Is
This is a different person.
I know this isn't your specialty, but is there is there a cola bean?
I don't think so.
No one knows where cola comes from. Is it a synthetic tasted thing?
I don't know.
All right. Anyway.
I thought it says caramel flavoring in there.
No, that's now. But originally, it was like a nut or
Well,
something.
it must not have been good.
That was pilled down. Anyway, so back to the war on drugs. So the war on drugs really started.
It's a cola nut.
It's a cola nut. See,
Yeah.
thank you. I was having whoever I was having a fight with last week about this.
You had a fight about
I had a disagreement. It could have
He's
been
very
my girlfriend.
bored.
I could have looked it up, but I chose not to. Now, so really the war on drugs happened in the 1940s. Now, as you said, we got places like Portugal, which is completely, drugs aren't really existent at all there. Well, no, they're existent. Anyone can take them. They're not illegal in Portugal, correct?
So it's important to just explain how it works. So in the year 2000, Portugal had one of the worst drug problems in the world. So 1% of the population was addicted to heroin, which is kind of mind-blowing, right?
Wow, that
And
is crazy.
every year, yeah, it's extraordinary. And every year they tried the American way more. They arrested more people, they punished more people. And every year the problem got worse. Until finally the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition got together and they were like, we can't go on like this. What are we going to do? They decided to do something really radical, something no one had done in the 70 years since Harry Anslinger. They said, should we ask some scientists what we should do? So they set up a panel of scientists and doctors led by an amazing man I got to know, Dr. Johann Hari. And they said to them, you guys go away, look at the best science, figure out what would actually solve this problem, and come back and we've agreed in advance we'll do whatever you recommend. So the panel went away, they looked at loads of evidence, including an amazing experiment about addiction that I can tell you about later if you like. And they came back and they said, okay, decriminalize all drugs, from cannabis to crack, the whole lot. But, and this is the crucial next step, take all the money we currently spend on fucking people's lives up, on chasing them, arresting them, imprisoning them, and spend all that money instead on turning their lives around. Interestingly, it wasn't really what we think of as addiction treatment in the US and Britain, right? So there's a little bit of residential rehab that has some value. Biggest thing was a big program of reconnection for the people with addiction problems. So big program of job creation. Say you used to be a mechanic. They go to a garage, they say, if you employ this guy for a year, we'll pay half his wages. The goal was to say to everyone in Portugal with an addiction problem, we love you, we value you, we're on your side, we want you back. And by the time I went to Portugal, the results were in. Addiction was down by more than 50%. Overdose deaths are down by 80%. Portugal went from being quite near the top of the European Union's drug problems league table to the very bottom. And one of the ways you know it works so well is nobody in Portugal wants to go back. I went and interviewed a guy called João Figueira, who led the opposition to the decriminalization when it first happened, right? He was the top drug cop in the country. And at the time he said what loads of people understandably think when you propose decriminalizing all drugs, which is surely if we do this, we'll have a massive increase in drug use, we'll have kids using drugs, it'll be a nightmare. He said to me, everything I said would happen didn't happen. And everything the other side said would happen did, and he talked about how he felt really ashamed of that he'd spent so many years prior to the decriminalization fucking people up.
Is there people in Portugal that are still kicking back against this? Like my father, you could never convince of this. You could never tell him that giving them jobs and paying half their bills, that would just make him angry, a policy like that. Because
it's really interesting, yeah.
Because he would say, why should I have to pay their bills because they're addicts? And you know that I understand people's theories as well. Sometimes people get a little bit annoyed when I always find it funny when someone goes, I'm a recovered drug addict, and everyone claps. And I feel like going, we never clap the people who just never took the drugs to begin with. Why don't they get a little bit of I've never taken drugs. Well done. Like, as someone who has had friends who have taken drugs, I
no personal experience whatsoever.
Why do they get rewarded so much? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, Jim, because lots of people think this. My dad's very similar to your dad. My dad makes Donald Trump look like Oprah, but I think one thing that helps us to understand.
I'm so sorry.
Why does he black him up? Like, how bad's your dad?
Jesus.
That is, my dad would regard it as too liberal to black up. But no, if you want to think about that, because implicit in what you've said, totally understandably, lots of people, and I used to think like this, is that what addiction is just someone who used too many drugs, right? And it's really interesting. One of the biggest things I learned for the research for my book, it was hard for me to get my head around for a while, was that I had profoundly misunderstood what addiction is. So if you'd asked me when I started doing this research, whenever it was, 8 years ago, what causes, let's say, heroin addiction, because that was in some people close to me, I would have looked at you like you were an idiot, and I would have said, well, obviously heroin causes heroin addiction, right? The clue's in the name. We think, if you guys kidnapped the next 20 people to walk past your studio in LA and you injected them all with heroin every day for a month, like a villain in a Saw movie, at the end of that month, they'd all be heroin addicts for a simple reason. There are chemical hooks in heroin that their bodies would start to desperately physically need. And at the end of that month, they'd all have, the desperate physical hunger for these hooks. That's why we call it being hooked, right? The first thing that alerted me to the fact there's something not right about that is when it's explained to me in Britain, where I am, if I step out into the street when I finish talking to you guys and I get hit by a truck and I break my hip,
you'll be addicted to it. You'll always want to step in front of trucks.
Exactly. I'm going to be craving that truck high ever since. No, I'll get taken to hospital and I'll be given loads of a drug called diamorphine, right? Diamorphine is heroin. It's medically pure heroin. It's much better than the shit I could buy on the streets. People in British hospitals are given medically pure heroin for quite a long time. If any of you have a British grandmother and she's had a hip replacement operation, your grandmother has taken a lot of heroin, right?
Right.
If what we think about addiction is right, that it's mainly or entirely driven by the chemical hooks, what should be happening to all these grandmothers in British hospitals? Some of them should be leaving hospital addicted, right? This has been studied very carefully. It never happens. And when I learned that, I just thought, that can't be right. How could you have a situation where you have someone in a hospital bed being given loads of really powerful heroin? They don't become addicted. You've got someone in the alleyway outside who's actually taking a much weaker form of heroin who does. It didn't seem to make sense. And I only began to understand it. And it goes to the point you were, I think, getting at, Jim. When I went to Vancouver and met an incredible man named Professor Bruce Alexander, who's really transformed how we think about addiction. So Professor Alexander explained to me, this theory we have in our heads that addiction is caused mainly by the chemical hooks comes from a series of experiments that were done earlier in the 20th century. They're really simple experiments. You guys could try them at home if you feel a bit sadistic.
All you need is a bit of heroin, a needle, a belt, and a spoon. I never understood the spoon because I've got shaky hands because of drinking in my 20s, right? I got shaky hands. How do you if you're a drug addict, how do you keep the spoon steady? You should have like a little tiny saucepan where it won't spill over the edge.
This is a really important innovation in heroin use that I'll recommend to all the addicts I know. But just to say about
a tiny saucepan, you know what I'm talking about?
I thought you meant like a sippy cup.
No, just like an itty bitty saucepan, like it still holds the same as a spoon, but it's got upward edges, not just a little curved in thing. You can still put the needle in and pull it out. You can still heat up on it. Little heroin saucepans. That brings us to our new sponsor, Little Heroin Saucepans.
One group of people you could have recommended the heroin saucepans to are the people the people who did this experiment, because just to say it very quickly, this idea that the addiction comes mainly from the chemical hooks comes from these experiments that are really simple. You take a rat, you put it in a cage, and you give it 2 water bottles. One is just water, the other is water laced with either heroin or cocaine. If you do that, the rat will always prefer the drugged water and almost always kill itself by overdosing within a week or so, right? So there you go. That's
Jack.
Fucking
there
rat.
you go, right? That's our story. But in the 70s, Professor Alexander came along and said, well, hang on a minute. The rat is put alone in an empty cage. It's got nothing to do except use these drugs. It's got nothing that makes life meaningful for rats. What would happen if we did this differently? So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically heaven for rats. They've got loads of friends, they've got loads of cheese, they can have loads of sex, they've got coloured balls, anything a rat could want in life.
Yeah,
and
they get to dob in their mafia friends. Rat Park.
Exactly. And they've got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drugged water. And of course they try both. This is the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, they don't like the drugged water that much. None of them use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose. There's lots of human examples, but what this shows us is the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. The core of addiction is about being in so much pain that you don't want to be present in your life.
Right. So
about...
addiction is a mental thing where boredom or pain or whatever that you want to fight against, rather than I want to make this even better.
Exactly, which is very different to drug use. There's 90% of drug use is not addiction. 90% of drug use is you use the drug to make your life better. You snort a line of coke to have more fun, or whatever, or you drink some alcohol or whatever it is.
I remember when I was taking too much ecstasy, I got to that stage where I went and saw The Phantom Menace, and I went, I'll pop a pill. And I'm like, they spend like $100 million on special effects. And I'm thinking, but what if I watch it on ecstasy?
Yeah.
Then this film will really kick off. You know what I mean?
I did that with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which I don't know why.
What?
I don't know. It's Coen Brothers movie.
No. You want to do it with a fun, spectacular film.
Let's take a quick break before he answers this and come right back.
Okay.
Did you know 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? Not me. My hair grew back naturally.
Mine. I've got like a bald spot in the back.
I've been taking tablets for a very long time. There's a thin line between me and hair. Anyway, the best way to prevent hair loss is to do something about it while you still got some. That's what I did. Well, I still had some. Who wants to go to a doctor right now? No one. Thanks to Keeps. That's Keeps. You can visit a doctor online and the hair loss medication delivered right to your door every 3 months. Keeps offers generic version of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products out there. You may have tried them before, and probably for never this price, though. What does Keeps do?
I like it. I'm telling you, I had like a bald spot on the top of my head, and then my hair's starting to thin in the front, and I started using it, and it's been helping. I don't care if people really know, because that's a weird thing that people care whether you know you're taking.
Well, the treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results. So it's important to act fast. The sooner that you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. Find out why Keeps has more 5-star reviews than all of its competitors. Nearly 1,000 men trust Keeps.
100,000 men.
100,000. 100,000 men.
How many did you
trust
say?
100,000.
But before that, what'd you say?
There's loads of them. 100 men.
100 would be terrible.
100,000 men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. Keeps treatments start from just $10 a month. That's $10 a month. That's crazy. How are you going to get girls without hair? You can't. You can't. $10 a month. You're going to get laid. Plus, for a limited time, you can get your first month for free. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/I don't know to receive a first month of treatment for free. That's KEEPS.com/I don't know. Keeps. There's never been a bad time to save money, but now more than ever, finding smart ways to put some cash back in your pocket can make a huge difference. One way you can do that is to save on things that you already pay for, like home insurance. If you own a home, re-shopping for your home insurance rate with Policy Genius can save you a good chunk of change. And the best part is, it's really easy. First, head to policygenius.com and answer a few quick questions about yourself and your home. Like, ask you questions like, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How's your home? Oh, I live in it. Things like that. Easy. Then Policy Genius will compare your policy against options from top insurers to make sure you're getting the right home insurance coverage at the best possible price. If Policy Genius finds you a better rate than you're currently paying, they will take care of everything and get you switched over. How easy is that?
Very.
I own a car too. Do you own a car as well as a house? Who are these psychopaths who just own houses and not cars? I own a car too. Policy Genius will compare your home and auto policies across different insurers and even mix and match to find you savings. They've saved their customers on average $1,127 per year doing just that. So if you would like to put a little bit of cash back in your pocket right now, see how much you can save by reshopping your home insurance rate at policygenius.com. That's policygenius.com. All right, we're back. We're talking about addiction.
The drug war is based on the idea if someone's got an addiction problem, we need to punish them and shame them to give them an incentive to stop. But once you see that pain is the driver and the fuel, you can see actually far from solving the problem, it makes it worse. In Arizona, I went out with a group of women who were made to go out on a chain gang wearing T-shirts saying I was a drug addict while members of the public mock them and jeer at them.
I love a bachelorette party.
Wait, hold on. The public's allowed to mock them?
Yeah, this was Sheriff Joe Arpaio.
Sheriff Joe. Yeah, we know all about Sheriff Joe. We've heard all about this guy. So
I interviewed Sheriff Joe.
I love when they do that. Like they do criminals. Like there was a kid in Australia who shoplifted in Target, and they made him wear a T-shirt that said "I shoplifted in Target" or something like that. He had to walk around the store. But then, like, those T-shirts got so popular, I think Target started selling them. People, like, other kids wanted to look like they were tough nuts, you know? So what did they have to do? They were on a chain gang.
Watch your mic.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just you realise, it's not. Sometimes people say, "Oh, that doesn't work." The truth is much worse, right? Those women have had fucking horrendous, traumatizing lives. When you talk to them, they're in terrible pain. By the time they leave that prison, they're even more broken, even more traumatized. They turn to even more drugs. If you look at, you can compare places, right? You can compare the countries that have policies based on shame and punishment. The US, for example, what is happening? The worst addiction epidemic in the modern world, right? Opioid crisis is killing almost as many people as car accidents now. Compare that to the countries that adopted radically different approaches. We already talked about Portugal. Switzerland legalized heroin for people with addiction problems since more than 15 years ago. Since that, they have had 0 overdose deaths on legal heroin in the country. 0, not one person, right? So you have to look at the comparison. At some point, we have to stop following the places that have disastrously failed and realize that the only policies that actually work are ones based on love and compassion. That's true when it comes to addiction, but actually, weirdly, although you can tell it's close to my heart, I don't actually think that's the biggest moral issue around the drug war. The biggest moral issue is the violence caused by prohibition. And it comes back to, you mentioned Al Capone, which was right on the money, Jim. When you ban drugs, they don't disappear, right? They're transferred from doctors and pharmacists to armed criminal gangs, right? And this creates a huge amount of violence. If you left the studio, I mean, it'd be hard now because of COVID-19, but if in a normal time, if you left the studio and you tried to steal a bottle of vodka, right? The store would catch you and the store would call the police. So
it'd be easier to do now. You got your mask on.
Yeah.
I've never been more ready to steal
Yeah.
vodka in my entire life.
No fingerprints.
Okay, well then this analogy is flawed in this unusual historical situation.
You can do anything.
If the store caught you, they'd ring the cops, so the cops would come and take you away. So that store doesn't need to be violent. They don't need to be intimidating. They've got the law to uphold their property rights, right? Okay, now imagine you wanted to steal a bag of Coke or a bag of meth, right? Obviously, the person selling that can't call the cops, right? They've got to fight you. But they don't want to be having a fight every day. So they've got to establish a reputation for being so frightening that you wouldn't fuck with them. In fact, they've got to establish their place in the neighborhood through violence.
Oh, there's nothing worse than being sold drugs that aren't drugs. Kelly, you've probably been here, right? When you buy like a bag of cocaine and it turns out to just be like talcum powder or something like that. And then you're like, fuck, I got ripped off, right?
You have no recourse.
I actually years and years ago went to buy drugs with a friend who's famous, who we all know, right?
Yeah.
And the person sold him the drugs and took a photo with him. And they were fake drugs.
It's like, what are you
That's a ballsy move.
Yeah, you're gonna call them up and be like, yeah, because it's exactly what you're saying.
You have no recourse. You can't go, hey, don't call the police.
And this is kind of like what when we got into talking about like the cartels and the narco traffickers and stuff. It's like that's like ultra violence, right? That's
I spent a lot of time with cartel members, and I actually became friends with Pablo Escobar's son, who's an amazing. You should have him on your show, but you might figure out quite quickly who he is, but because he looks exactly like Pablo Escobar.
And his name's Pablo Escobar Jr.
What's actually his name? We had to change it.
Our guest today is Pablo.
He said to me, the only thing my dad truly feared was the legalization of drugs, right? The war on drugs creates a war for drugs.
Yeah.
It creates this huge amount of violence. It transfers the trade, and legalization reclaims the trade from those armed criminal gangs.
But wouldn't have he been the guy that's like could have opened up his marketplace? Like I've got the most amount of cocaine plants, you know?
They would have still made money though, right? But just less money, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, you've got to bear in mind, he controlled the trade through violence. He mainly controlled the trade.
Yeah, and also the government bodies would start making you get a license, and when you were made to get a license, they could deny you getting a license. I'm sure.
I think for Escobar though, wasn't most of it at the end of it just about power anyway, because they had made so much money that it's not like the money was the important part. They were losing money just from being buried in the dirt, right? Like I assume that's running things, the power.
Essentially, if you look at why he was killed when he was killed, Pablo Escobar. So the day he's killed, Bill Clinton goes on television and says it's a great victory for the war on drugs. Actually, what happened is Pablo Escobar was killed because the rival Cali cartel paid the Colombian military and police to do it, and then they immediately took over his entire trade. So what was presented as a victory in the war on drugs was actually a victory for one group of murderous gangsters over another. And this is the truth. Whenever you're never going to get rid of the drug trade, right? It's inconceivable. That's not the debate, right? It's a ludicrous fantasy.
Well, okay, so what's the idea behind? Okay, so you're saying we can never get rid of it. What is the idea behind? Okay, so when my mother passed away almost a year ago today, right? And at the end, she was on heroin for the last 2 weeks. She was just on morphine the whole time. And it dawned on me that it's not a bad way to go, the morphine. Like, if you're on morphine, you're in a lot of pain. They're just pumping you full of morphine for the last couple of weeks. It's a pretty chill way to leave this planet, right? You're lucky to die a heroin addict, right? But I know what you're saying. They're not really addicts and all that type of stuff because of the thing. Now, okay, because that's pure heroin that's going in morphine. Is morphine pure heroin? Am I correct in saying that?
What your mother would have been given would have been, in Australia, would have been diamorphine, which is pure heroin.
It was pure heroin, right? So that's the clean stuff. Now, most of the overdoses and stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, happen because the drugs aren't pure. Is that correct?
Not most, but a lot of harm is caused by the fact that the drugs aren't pure.
It's whatever they're cut with or what have you. So how far, so in a legalized world, so what they're doing in Portugal, is that all pure drugs now? Or is there still a secondhand market? Or are the shops aren't opening? Are they just decriminalized in the sense that you can take drugs and we're not going to arrest you, or are they actually selling the stuff?
So there's a difference between, you've gone to a really important distinction. There's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. So decriminalization is where you don't punish people for using drugs, but they still have to go to armed criminal gangs to get them.
Right.
Legalization is where you open up some legal route to get the drug. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, of course, you can go into a shop and buy it for every drug, but there's some legal route. So think about Switzerland, right? In Switzerland, I spent a lot of time there reporting on this. In Switzerland, if you're a heroin addict, you're assigned to a clinic. You go to that clinic, you're given your heroin there, it's medically pure heroin. You can't take it out with you, partly because they want to watch you as you use it, and partly because they don't want you to resell it on the street. And then you leave to go to your job because you're given loads of support to get housing, work, and so on. And one of the things that was really striking to me in those clinics in Switzerland is, you can stay on that program as long as you want. There's never any pressure to cut back your dose or stop using. But almost everyone does cut back and stop. And I'm thinking of Rita Mangi, who's the psychiatrist who runs it, like, well, how can that be? Because we're told the drug takes you over, you need more and more of it. And she looked at me like I was an idiot. And she said, well, we help them so their lives get better. And as their lives get better, they don't want to be anesthetized so much, right? But so that's important because that's a model of legalization. So that is, you are given the drug, right? That's a legal route, but it's not, there isn't like a heroin aisle in CVS, right, in Switzerland. There's different legal routes for different drugs.
Okay, this is probably a bad thing to say, but I'm not confident. I just touched my face. I'm not confident that I would, if heroin was made legal, I'm pretty confident I'd give it a go. Because like this is the thing is I never really took weed. You've known me for a long time. I never really took weed. I was in alcohol. They made weed legal. They put a shop at the end of my street. I take weed almost daily now. It's been a big turning point for me. And
it's better for you.
And it's gotten me off alcohol.
Right.
I hardly drink anymore.
Jim, that is so important what you just said, right? Which is that actually, if you look at what happens when you decriminalize or legalize, some drug use goes up. It's important. But what seems to happen is that alcohol use goes down. So what you have is a certain amount of intoxication that people want in the society.
Correct.
And the actual intoxicant they choose, I'm not that bothered what your intoxicant is, right? It's not really my concern. But the question is, so actually, sometimes people go, oh, cannabis has been legalized and there's been this level of increase, which is true and important to talk about. But it's followed by a corresponding decrease in alcohol. And this seems to be true across the board. What you get when you legalize is not an increase in drug use, but a shifting pattern of drug use, where some drugs decline and other ones improve.
Well, I'm just saying if they legalize ecstasy, then I will probably take a lot more ecstasy and get off the weed. And then I'll take the cocaine to get off the ecstasy and then the heroin. It's like the idea of we got snakes in our town. So you bring in a mongoose and then the mongoose is here. Oh, no, you got to bring it. In the end, we have gorillas. How do we get rid of them?
I feel like with the really intense things, they've always regulated
what happened in Portugal
themselves.
and Switzerland, actually what happened is in both cases, after the decriminalization and legalization, there was a significant decline in drug-related problems, partly because actually the heaviest drug use is addictive use, and you can deal with that using the money that we're currently using to fuck people up. But in a sense, there's a truth in what you're saying, because the reality is we've had 100 years, almost 100 years, where we've experimented in one way of responding to drugs and only one way, right? What we need to have are experiments all over the world in alternatives. And maybe we'll try some alternatives and they'll be worse than what we've got now. Seems hard to imagine given that opioids are almost the single biggest killer of Americans. But okay, let's try alternatives.
Yeah, okay, but that brings us to that. I've always found, coming from Australia, where we had gutter drugs, speed and meth and all that type of stuff, right? Synthetic drugs that were made for us. And then I come over to America. I never experienced people being addicted to Oxycontins and stuff. It wasn't as prevalent. I found out my mother used to take a lot of Oxycontins, but that was never a thing. Where that always seemed like a really sort of weird American phenomenon. This whole like I'm addicted to prescription painkillers. So, and people would argue that prescription painkillers are somewhat legal, and that's the biggest problem we have here in America.
Well, if you look at there's several things to say about that. The first to say, when do they become problematic, right?
Right.
So let's say I've got an Oxycontin addiction, right?
Right.
And I go to my doctor and I say, you know what? I've realized actually I'm not taking this for my back pain. I'm taking it because I'm addicted, because my life is bad and I've got a lot of trauma. At that point, by law, my doctor has to throw me off my prescription meds. They, by law, have to. Otherwise, they can be busted as a drug dealer. And lots of doctors in the United States have been sent to prison for prescribing for addiction, right? Most of the problems are happening at that, not all of them, it's important to say not all, but most of the problems are happening at that bridging point when they're thrown off it and they can no longer access a legal supply. Other most important thing to say about the opioid crisis is, where is it happening, right? People have been told a story. You mentioned Nancy Reagan before and Just Say No. People have been told a story about the opioid crisis that is grossly simplistic and a bit like the Nancy Reagan story from the 80s. So Nancy Reagan explained the so-called crack epidemic by saying, okay, a group of uniquely evil drug dealers have come along and sold a uniquely powerful drug to these people and it has taken them over. That was the story, right? We all know now that was way too simplistic. But we've basically adapted that story. We now say a uniquely evil group of drug dealers who happen to be the big pharma, who are indeed scum, have sold this uniquely powerful drug and it's taken people over. If that was true, opioid addiction would be highest where access to opioids is highest. So everyone on the faculty of Harvard has really good medical insurance and they could all get legal opioids tomorrow.
Right.
Opioid addiction on the faculty of Harvard is really low. People in West Virginia, through no fault of their own, do not have good health insurance in the main, and opioid addiction is off the scale in West Virginia. What's actually happening is the best experts on this, Professor Angus Dayton and Professor Ann Case, have called these deaths of despair, right? everyone
Because
has.
it's horrible
everyone
to
kno-
live in Virginia.
Yes.
West
West
Virginia,
Virginia.
especially. Yeah, even
West
more.
Virginia.
Right.
It's not through no fault of the people there. They've been strict.
Well, they
after
could
a fact-
move. They could move.
You,
Well,
you
no, a
always
lot of
say
the
they
time.
couldn't move, Jim.
I am a bit,
After-
that is my most right wing thing that I
Yeah.
have going for me. I am the most when I hear about water in Flint. Well, move. I lived in Britain. I lived in Australia. I
Yeah.
lived here.
Yeah, but
I was never rich. I had no fucking money.
Yeah, but you didn't have 3 kids, and you weren't like they were.
I didn't
poorer than
acknowledge
you were.
3 kids. Sure.
Yeah, it's
But-
not as easy to move as you think.
No, but it is easy. You can live in a fucking caravan.
It's not easy. It's not easy at all to move.
America's a big...
Your mother's elderly. These are the only people you know. This
Yeah.
is the, you know.
My
it's-
mother
it-
was elderly. That's why I
Yeah,
moved
but you
to
can't.
Britain.
Even if you wanted to move to LA, let's say, and then try and like rent something here, you couldn't find a place to
Yeah.
rent.
I'm
if
not
you-
saying you have to live in LA. I'm just saying there's a lot of bits of America that are cheaper. Fuck drugs. fuck. Don't even worry about drugs. Don't even worry about this. This is what I'm going to say to Americans. It's a big country. Why are you living in a place where you have to shovel your fucking driveway? If you live in a place with snow, where in the morning you get a shovel so you can get into your car, I just have no respect for you. What are you thinking?
All right.
You can live anywhere. You can live in fucking Hawaii. You've got a shitty job and you're shoveling snow. Have a shitty job and live near a beach.
Hawaii's
Stop trying to
expensive.
convince people to move to LA. It's
Not
already
LA, not LA, not LA. There's
Oh,
plenty of
definitely
places.
don't come to LA.
No, there's plenty of places. You drive up and down the coast of California, you'll find some little fucking...
It's expensive,
Yeah,
California.
California's
Yeah.
expensive.
Go
as
live in
hell.
Portland. Go live in the place where they filmed the Goonies.
In Oregon?
Yeah,
Astoria?
Oregon.
Astoria, Oregon.
Go live in Astoria, Oregon.
They need
It's
the help.
lovely.
They need the-
Lovely there.
Hey, Johan, I have a question.
Sure.
So, which TV show or movie do you think portrays
Ooh,
the
great question.
cartel the best? Because there's so many TV shows and movies that have cartel influence, like whether it's like Breaking Bad or Ozark or
Yeah, I just finished watching Ozark.
yeah, or anything. And
Love
it's like
Narcos.
I always watch it and I'm like, is this really how it is? Like, I mean, I know you don't know.
Ozarks isn't real.
Yeah. None of it's
Ozark,
real.
there's no system. That Martin Bird, he goes like this. He goes, "Oh, don't kill me." At the beginning, don't kill me. I'll move down to the Ozarks and then I'll be able to flip money because everyone here is looking at me in Chicago and they're like, "Oh man, that's a good plan." And then he goes down there and he goes, "Oh yeah, what I'll do is I'll buy a strip club and a local hotel." And then everyone in town knows him in 5 seconds, and
Right.
the FBI are hanging down. They're just staring at him all day. And the cartel are like, "Oh, that Martin Bird, fucking hell, he came up with a good plan." He just fucks the whole town. It's the most unrealistic. Anyway, I'm on season 3. Don't tell me what happens.
Season 3 is great.
It is
But
great.
Johan, I don't know like how many shows or movies or anything you've seen, but is there anything that you were like, wow, that seems to ring more true?
You know, I spent a lot of time with some cartel people. I spent time in Juarez just after the peak of the madness there. I was a bit cartelled out by the end of having got, you know, I was a bit resistant to watching some of the TV about it. I remember the first in my book Chasing the Scream, I tell the story of this guy who was a hitman for the Mexican drug cartels called Rosalio Reta, who I got to know. He butchered or beheaded about 70 people,
Mm.
and
you
I
supposed
went
to
to
tell
interview
us
him in
that?
prison. Sorry.
Are you supposed to tell us that?
Yeah, it's okay. He's in prison. He can't kill us. And I remember the
Kelly
first time
fed
I
her
went,
husband to the Tigers.
when I went
Sardine
to
oil.
interview him, so on the way in, the guard goes like, "So obviously he butchered or beheaded 70 people, so I can't leave you alone with him." And I was like, "Good, I'm pleased to hear that."
Yeah.
So I sort of sit down, and about 5 minutes in, they fucking left me with him. I was like, anyway, fortunately he's quite small and scrawny.
Oh yeah, like that's gonna stop
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
Like,
He's
Yeah,
also
yeah.
psychotic.
Yeah, so how small were these 70 people? I didn't know you were such a tough guy. Yeah, so I could fucking take him, couldn't I, son? Small, little, scrawny Mexican fucking fellow with it.
start poking him in
He
the
was-
chest.
He actually killed all the people he butchered or beheaded. He killed between the ages of 14
Yeah.
and 17.
Oh.
Oh,
He was
He's a
properly
baby
scrawny,
killer.
but he was massively.
Wait a
he was
minute.
basically-
Are they the big people who are fucking over the cartel? 14 to 17-year-olds?
Probably, I guess.
So they call them expendables. So they have a little army of what they call expendables, who are the young kind of kids.
Yeah.
They're currently like child soldiers in Africa, basically.
So it's like 14-year-olds, 17-year-olds, Sylvester Stallone, Dolph Lundgren,
Exactly.
Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Most actors, Tom Cruise. Yeah, you can take him. So
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
To answer your question, I think Breaking Bad was in some ways a pretty
Yeah.
pretty good representation of the ways violence works under the war for drugs. And I was thinking about, Walter White's story in A World of Legalization. Pablo Escobar's son said to me, if drugs had been legal, my dad would have been a used car salesman and none of you would have heard his name, right? And in a similar way, because some people go, oh, well, look, these people would have been violent anyway, right? And it's true. There are some people who are currently in the drug trade who, for whatever reason, are sociopathic and would have committed acts of violence anyway. But there is no alternative system that would have given Rosario Reta, enormous number of machine guns and the means to go and massacre and butcher and behead 70 people. Right?
Pablo Escobar's son, what does he get up to now? What's his job? Is it just like being Pablo Escobar's son? Does he just go around and chat about being Pablo Escobar?
He's a sandwich artist at Subway.
It's interesting because he's a really fascinating guy. He lives in Buenos Aires. When I asked to meet him, he said, yeah, come to a Burger King. And he gave me an address. So I was the only person sitting in a children's play area of Burger King with Pablo Escobar's son. It was like a weird fucking stress stream. But he now runs a shoe business.
A shoe what?
It's the unglamorous answer. Yeah, shoe business.
A shoe business? Like he polishes them at airports or
no, he manufactures them.
Manufactures them. So what's the brand of shoes if I want some Escobars?
I'm not actually sure what it's called. I'll email you
Crocs.
the information.
He makes Crocs. He's
He's
the Croc guy.
Come on, his family's committed a lot of crimes, but they wouldn't go that far, right?
They're very comfortable.
Yeah. They cost $5,000, and if you cut into the heel,
Yeah, no one knows that. But I have some quick hitter questions for you, Jim.
Sure.
All right. I'm gonna ask Jim Neese, see if he knows the answer, and then maybe you know the answer. I think you probably know the answer, so we'll see. Which president of the United States declared a war on drugs, Jim?
Ronald Reagan.
Nope. That you got that right. Do you know the answer, Johann? I got the answer, but it's.
I know you think it's Nixon. It's not. But
that's the answer I had.
Eisenhower.
Yeah, it's not.
I was gonna say Nixon. Our producer gave me that answer. Way to go, Alex. You suck.
Fired.
Now, what's the president then? Which one?
But there were lots of presidents before. It's not clear who was the first person to use the phrase, but Nixon ramped it up massively. So you can.
I'll say Washington. That's why he had all those wooden teeth. It was the meth.
Okay, here's this one. What percentage of federal inmates have been convicted of a drug offense as their most serious offense, and what? There. So what?
Actually, so who is in prison? Their most serious offense is a drug offense.
Yeah. What percentage of federal inmates have been?
I'd say 80%.
That's a little bit lower than that. I don't know if it says 45.5%, but I got this from Alex again, so who knows?
Could be wrong.
These could all be wrong.
It's about around half.
Yeah, around half, but that's what I used to say, like in my joke when I used to say I'm not going to say what it is, but.
So if we stop the war on drugs, our prisons ease up, and then we're all good.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, my favorite TV show is Locked Up Abroad. I love a Locked Up Abroad. Yeah. Fuck, I love a Locked Up Abroad. But sometimes I like ones where they're thrown into like a South American prison and they're just thrown in there and there's no guards or anything.
Yeah.
And then they have to live. And then there's like the people who lie a bit, like, and they're just like this. Yeah, I just beat up like 10 people and I never got raped.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You sure now? I'm just
Why are you waddling?
There was a one in Greece, remember, where they just were like in an olive orchard and they're like, we just got in this boat to God.
Yeah. That one, in Greece, where it's like we made the chicken coop into a ladder, right? And you could fold the chicken coop out, and then you could climb over the wall. And then there was a boat sitting there, and so we got that, and we rode. And then there was another one. There was like these young blokes who got locked in prison, and they dug a hole, but then they cracked into the sewerage. And so they sent like a meth addict down into the sewerage to plug the hole, and he just swam through shit, man. And he did it though. He did it. And he got a hit of meth from it, so good for him. All right, next question.
All right, we have one more, and then I want to ask. Okay, so for every 100,000 people who use alcohol, 650 die as a result. For every 100,000 people who use cocaine, how many die as a result? Don't know what year this is from.
I have to think it's higher than alcohol. I have to, because I know the effects on it feel a lot more, but I don't know if you use it because you don't have alcohol overdoses. I know you can drink yourself to death in one sitting.
Yeah, people die from alcohol though.
I know, but the alcohol deaths are more of a prolonged liver damage came in after years and years of abuse.
So 650 out of 100,000 for alcohol. How many out of 100,000 for cocaine?
You're talking about like pure cocaine or shit that's cut.
Just give
with
a fucking number.
Just 1,000.
1,000?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I do know, but I don't. It's lower. It's
Did you ask a question
30?
that you didn't have the
No,
answer?
no, no, no.
I don't know. I was actually asking you for
I
advice.
I had a brain problem there. It's
You'd
4.
be a great quiz master. You're like game show with Forrest Shaw. What South American country is known as Pablo Blah?
I don't know.
And then they go, is it Argentina? And then they cut back to Forrest. I don't know. I don't know. It could be. It could be. There's no reason why it wouldn't be.
What I meant
I'm
to
going to give you partial point, half point.
What I meant to say is the answer is 4, as again Alex has given to me. So I don't know, Alex. He's in the booth over there.
What you meant to
Is it-
say was
is it-
4
is it
instead
less
of
than
I don't
alcohol?
know.
That's 4.
Yeah,
4 out of
4 instead of
100,000.
650.
Radically less. Because
Yeah.
you've got to remember, Jim, you're saying it's a lot less from alcohol long term. That's true, but those are alcohol deaths, right?
Mm.
I mean,
But
alcohol kills-
cocaine, you feel like you're going to die when you take too much of it.
Yeah, but I the thing is I don't when I've
So what we're saying is, well, I can go back into that. It's been years. It has been years.
Well-
So I don't know. Did I give up something that wasn't hurting me?
Yeah, I think you did, honestly.
I'm getting a message from Alex that that was actually taken from Johann's site, and he's called me a dick. Alex did too.
yeah,
in
yeah,
a
Can I give the
message,
source? Or
yeah.
yeah.
A lot of Alex's statistics just come from
No.
thoughts that he had.
This is from Johann, so directly. So that's why you had an answer for this as well. So you were saying, so it is less than, and most drugs are going to be less than alcohol, or not all of them, or is that?
Yeah. Well, alcohol's so Professor David Nutt, who's was the former chief scientific advisor on drugs in Britain, did the breakdown, and alcohol is the second deadliest drug per person. Obviously, far more people use alcohol, but it's per person who uses it.
Wait, the second
It's the
most?
second-
What, number one's heroin?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Heroin.
really?
So
Heroin
would you
with a
still do
bullet.
heroin?
I've
if
never
it-
done heroin. Never tried
But
heroin.
if it was legalized, you'd still do it?
If it was legalized and it was pure, I don't know. I wouldn't mind just. I wouldn't mind knowing what all the fuss is about.
I know. The curiosity is
The
there.
curiosity's
definitely.
always got
Yeah.
me. My parents were the strictest parents ever. My mother was the strict. The other kids used to go, "Oh fuck your mum, man." Like my mum was the strictest parent that you could believe. But on everything, if I was late or I was this or I was that, I had to certain ways I had to act and things that I did wrong, and a lot of pressures from my childhood, right? But my mother, for whatever reason, I was allowed to get fucked up drunk at 14. Never in the house. My parents never gave me drink. My parents weren't those cool parents that were like, "We'd rather you drank in front of us so we know what you're doing." But I was off in the park just getting fucked up drunk at 14, and my parents never said shit. I used to come home drunk like on the regular.
And they knew.
They knew, and I asked my mum years later about it, and I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Oh, well, I knew I couldn't stop you." And I was like, "You stopped me doing
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
You stopped me doing everything. I was never allowed to do anything. My childhood was so strict, except for this one thing." And so now, being a parent, I have this: how strict am I going to be with my son? And now with weed being legal,
And how strict are you going to be?
I think I'm going to be pretty strict. I think I'm going to
Like
be
not
pretty
at all,
strict.
zero tolerance?
Look, I'm not going to fucking murder the kid if he gets caught doing something stupid. I'm going to try to talk through it, but I'm not going to have this whole, "Hey, if you want to do it around the house, bring your friends over." I'm not going to be that fucking parent.
It's going to be hard though, because there's a lot of footage of you
It's
talking
going to
about
be
it.
hard because there's a lot of footage, including this exact podcast.
You haven't
No,
said you did anything. on
you've
this
never
podcast.
done anything.
Yeah.
You know, when you,
I've never done
when you
anything.
think about, when you think about kids, it's interesting. I always think about, I interviewed this really conservative cop in New Jersey called Fred Martins, who had an epiphany. He wouldn't use such a fancy word as epiphany, but he had an epiphany about drugs one day. He was in 1973, he was staking out a car park in Wayne, in New Jersey. He was staking out a dealer. And a kid came up to him, like I think a 10 or 11-year-old, and said, "Hey, mister, I'm not allowed to buy alcohol. Will you go into that store and buy me some booze?" And Fred said, "Ah, fuck off, get out of here." So the kid walked up to the dealer and bought some drugs from him instead, because dealers don't check ID, right? And Fred had this epiphany. He's like, "Oh, actually, when something is legal, it puts a barrier between kids and drugs that otherwise doesn't exist, right?" So everyone agrees, kids shouldn't be using drugs. Obviously, it's bad for their developing brains and so on. And actually, if you want to protect your kids, the most sensible thing you can do is end the drug war and get drugs back from armed criminal gangs who actually don't give a shit how old their customers are, and get it into the hands of licensed businesses and pharmacies who actually have a lot to lose.
I understand that theory, but it didn't. Alcohol was legal. It didn't stop me from getting alcohol. That
Well,
whole
Australia
18
doesn't crack down. Yeah, Aussies and British people, we don't crack down very much on selling to underage people. If you think about the US, a lot of American 14-year-olds really can't.
It was really hard when I was a kid. We could
Yeah.
still get. It was a mission to get it. It was like really hard, and then
I got my brother's driver's license when it had expired, and I just said it was me. It very clearly wasn't me. It was a different person.
You can find
lucky.
places where you can do it. There was a guy that would sell us like porn magazines when we were under 18, and he was just a guy that didn't care.
Yeah,
But also, wasn't that to the point earlier that like
and then
banning,
he'd ring you up and ask how you'd been, and like he cared about some things.
but earlier we were talking about like when you ban things, it makes people want to use them more, right? So it's like you have those kids in high school where like what your mom did, where it's like she didn't care, but she wasn't going to facilitate it. That's probably the best thing she could have done for you because you didn't necessarily have to go out and be super rebellious about it. Like,
It turned out great.
well, like when you think about other countries where their drinking age is so much lower, it seems like they have a smaller problem with underage drinking than we do in the States. So I want like that has to be some sort of correlation.
The 21
there, right?
age is ridiculous.
It's insane.
And people always use the example of if you can go to war. No, it's if you can do porn. That's the example.
Because you're going to need the alcohol and the drugs.
If you can have 10 men stand around you and jack off on your face legally, give that girl a beer.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. Give that girl a beer.
She's going to need something harder than a beer.
Yeah, like this whole like, if you can fight for your country. No, there's plenty of shit you can do at 18 that is pretty fucking horrendous.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to have a beer? No. And also I found when I met Americans, okay, I think that the 21 age is why you all go so crazy in fraternities.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all the problems there because you all have to drink in house parties. We don't have fraternities in Australia and Britain in the same way. You have clubs in Oxford or whatever, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
Where there's people jelly wrestling, all that sort of stuff, because we've already had 3 years on you where we've gone out to bars and we weren't the coolest person in the room. We were the youngest person in the room where we were sort of just had to watch our P's and Q's because we didn't want to act like a fucking idiot. Where in colleges here, everyone goes to a house party and your most responsible person's like 20, 22.
Yeah.
Right? And of course you're going to have fucking idiots.
Well, that's the thing. I started drinking really early, but with my brother, it's like, so I knew by the time I got to college, I knew my body enough that I never drank too much that I was getting sick or doing any of that stuff. So I trained. Okay, so Johann, do you have a quick like fact for us that somebody could tell at a dinner party that would make them look like they're educated on this topic?
Yeah, kind of like what Jim talked to that at the beginning, like where we still want to have something that you could say to someone that people might not know, that might be obscure, interesting, or might not be mainstream.
I would say Switzerland legalized heroin 16 years ago, and since then there have been 0 heroin overdose deaths on legal heroin in the whole country.
That is
more
wild.
People have died of heroin overdoses since we started having this conversation in the US by a long way than have died in 16 years in Switzerland.
Yeah, but could it be because they have good chocolate? Like the Americans have dog shit chocolate
before the legalization.
Wait, what year was that then? So you said 16 years ago, but what year?
It was done in
say
stages.
2004.
So there's a bit of a debate about when it began. So the whole country, it was 16 years ago.
So 2005. Yeah, I know it
sort of began a little bit before that.
I know, Jim, but I'm saying so you
the
remember.
maths is so difficult. It's 2020.
No. I'm saying it so you remember it in your head, so you're not like 16 years ago and it's 5 years from now, like a jackass.
Oh, right?
Yeah. They've even gotten their little knives. They've got a little spoon that comes out.
They added that to the Swiss Army.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
That's going to be our first piece of merch for this podcast.
Yeah, a little
knives with-
needle comes out and a little spoon. Oh, I couldn't get by without this Swiss Army knife. Oh, there's a little tiny belt that comes out the bottom.
But no spoon, just a saucepan, you said?
I'm telling you, heroin saucepans. I've watched so many. Do people really use spoons? Is that accurate, what I see on TV?
Yeah.
Of course,
Okay,
yeah.
so they put the heroin in, right? They boil it up. They get like the end of a toothpick or something and they sort of mix it around or whatever, right? And they boil on a spoon. It would boil in a little saucepan. Here's a question for you. If you want to find all the people who deal drugs, this is how you do it, right? I've cracked it. Go to the manufacturers who make Ziploc bags that would only fit a quarter in.
The tiny ones.
Yeah, those Ziploc bags, they can't go. Yeah,
Jewelry.
we're selling. Yeah, we're selling millions of these, and then they're like, "What are you selling for?" Bead shops.
Etsy.
People have beads. So why have you put skulls and crossbows and fucking spiders on the back of them?
I've seen one with the Michael Jordan logo.
Just a bit of just a bit of fun, right? You find those Ziploc bag people, and you'll find all the drug dealers. That's where you got to trace it back. I'm telling you, plastics, you get rid of plastic, you get rid of drugs. Because you get rid of plastics, you get rid of the syringes, you get rid of the little Ziploc bags. People can't cut with credit cards because it used to be razor blades, right? If you rock up to a party with a mirror and a razor blade, you're a fucking psychopath, right? Like if you need your cocaine that finely dusted, a credit card's fine, but tell you, plastics, that's the real problem.
Allegedly, you've never done any drugs. Allegedly.
I've seen people do it. I once had a girlfriend who, there was other people doing drugs at the party, right? Not me. I was getting angry. And these other people at the party were doing drugs. And someone else said to this girl, and I was like a third date with her, said, "Do you want some blow?" And she wanted to be cool around me. I don't think she'd ever taken it. Because of what happened next. She went down with the rolled up note in her nose and she blew outwards, blowing all the cocaine off the table. I was the one who had brought her to this party and I just stood there going, well, it's good seeing you all. It's good seeing you all. And then God bless her. She was like, "Why is it called blow?" And I go, "It is confusing. It is confusing that it's not called suck. You think the stuff should be called suck.
Inhale quickly.
Inhale. Would you like some inhale?" But they call it fucking blow. And the poor lass, she blew it all onto the carpet. And that was the end. And it was a poor comedian's party. So there was like 1 gram being stretched out over 9 people. And
later, did she give you a blowjob? And they need to know how that went.
I can't remember. I went out on a few dates with her. She was a nice girl. Okay. I can't remember. I'm sure I had sex with her. I'm sure I got a blowjob out of it. Yes.
Did she blow on it?
She didn't blow. Okay. Yeah. See, why is it called a blowjob? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Why is it called cunnilingus? That's my longest word. My 2 longest words in this world are bukkake and cunnilingus.
Bukkake is like 6 letters, isn't it?
But I can spell it.
Oh, gotcha.
It's more than 6. Bukkake. 7.
Okay.
All right.
You don't want to play me in Scrabble if all the K's are being taken out of the bag.
All right, Jim. So we're gonna do one thing here real quick, Johann, where we have a real quick segment called "I Do Know About This." Jim has given Kellyanne a bunch of topics he claims to know a lot about, and we're gonna ask you some quick questions with quick answers. All right. Okay. Theme parks is today's topic that you said you know about. Theme parks.
I've been to a lot of theme parks. I don't know if I know historically.
Well, that's not what you told us.
Yeah.
Okay. But, okay. So what does Epcot stand for?
European countries of purpose.
Yes. You didn't even get the right letters.
He just put
EPCOT. Not you. It's a theme park, I
know what it is. It's a theme court where you travel around the world.
Stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow.
That's the worst bit of all of Disney is Epcot. It's like 2 rides in it. It's dog shit. One of the countries they try to show you at Epcot is Canada.
They have all the countries there.
Yeah, there's no Australia World. Yeah. They've got fucking Canada.
Yeah.
And it's like people are like, hey, because that was the idea was before, because it was in the 60s. It was before like everyone could do plane travel. And most Americans had never been outside of America. And so they said, what you do is you come to Disney World, you see this thing, and then you can travel around the world in a few hours. You can see everything. And then they go, what country should we put there? Someone's got a stuffed moose and some maple syrup. Shove that over there with a Mountie. Ta-da!
All right. What was the first theme park to have its own currency?
I want to say Tivoli in Copenhagen.
No, Legoland.
Legoland.
Yeah, Tivoli.
It has the Legos.
Yeah, that's the currency.
Yeah.
And then there's just to kind of tie it into this. There's a theme park in Mexico.
Yeah.
Where you can do a specific thing. It's not drug trafficking, but It's probably inappropriate, as I would say.
It's called. Oh, is this the one where you can have the sex with the donkeys? I've seen the porn.
It's not a theme park. That's at every
where
park.
you can pay money to have a horse fuck you or something
No,
like that.
there's
That
a-
seems
That's a
something-
donkey show.
There's a Mexican theme park that stages fake border crossings with a 7.5-mile night hike for only $18 per
Yeah.
person. You can do-
Really, you
Yeah.
get fake border crossings, and they're like, you can get caught halfway through.
Yeah, they have people that like pretend they're border patrols and they catch you.
And
Supposedly it's really difficult, but like I guess
Well, I
there was a
hope
lot
so,
of there was a lot of backlash because people are like, you're training people to cross the border, and they're like, no,
I
we
think
would make
the
it way
backlash
more
would
difficult.
be just even like pretending to be like a
Yeah.
a refugee.
It's like
that
a white
needs-
person going to do
But
this.
when
border
you
crossing.
when you get over the board, is there just like you get handed money and like a job, and
They
then
don't
you
get
start like
anything.
Yes.
shagging like an American woman,
That's exactly.
and you're like, yeah, America, and then like, dun, 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 and you see in the future when your sons become the president.
All right. So, Johann, thank you for being on. I don't know about that. I don't know if there's anything specifically you want to promote more
What's
than
the name of your book?
Oh yeah, so if people have got a lot of time to listen to things at the moment, so actually a lot of the people we've talked about, like the hitman for the deadliest Mexican drug cartel, Bruce Alexander, who did this amazing experiment about addiction, you can listen to the audio of loads of these people for free on the book's website. It's Chasing the Scream. It's like scream as in not screen. Scream, chasingthescream.com, and you can see where to get the book, the audio book, the ebook, where to follow me on social media, take a quiz to see how much you know about these subjects. Probably know as much as Jim.
Yeah.
But you can test yourself. And yeah, cheers. Thank you at chasingthescream.com. Cheers.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's been another episode of I Don't Know About That. And remember, if you're at a party and someone says something and you're a little bit confused, you can always say, well, I don't know about that. And you can just walk away. We'll talk to you next time.